Hey everyone, Cursed Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted. However, today we're doing something a little different. Instead of deck assisting, we have deck built. One of our viewers, Red Star, has reached out to me and wanted me to build a deck for them built around Francisco Foul Marauder, with the only real caveat being a budget of about $100. And that's exactly what we did. So thank you so much, Red Star, for supporting the channel, and I hope you like this deck. I think it's a lot of fun. For everyone else, this deck list, of course, will be in the video description down below. And if you're interested in sending me one of your decks to review, or if you're interested in, getting me to build you one of your decks, you can reach out to me. There is a link to an email account in the About section. So if you want me to build one of your decks, or you have an idea you want me to build, you can send it that way and we can figure it out. And hopefully we can all have a fun new deck to play with. But otherwise, Deck Assist link is in the video description as usual. All right, let's get to it. Who is Francisco Foul Marauder, and what are we going to do with him as our pirate commander? Well, let's start off by saying what the card is, and I think I'll put it in the thumbnail or something, but it's going to be a reanimation deck with a strong pirate theme. Francisco Foul Marauder is a 2-mana bird pirate 0/1 flying creature in black. They can't block, and they say whenever one or more pirates you control deal damage to a player, Francisco explores. Now this text, we've seen it a bunch of times. This means per player you hit with pirates. And so the maximum is 3, and the goal is 3. We want to hit 3 opponents hit with pirates as many times as we can on each combat to maximize Francisco. Now, Explorers is a really interesting ability. So when you explore, you reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a land, it goes into your hand. And if not, the exploring creature gains a +1/+1 counter, and then you can choose to either keep that card on top or put it in the graveyard. Now, the reason I went Reanimator is that I find, much like Surveil, I find that Explore is somewhat wasted if we do not bin the card. Imagine a situation where you explore 100 times on a creature that just can't attack or is going to die, right? Whenever you stop flipping cards into your graveyard, the rest of the explorers don't do anything. Not only do you not get more cards to see more of your deck, you don't draw more lands that might be underneath that top card. So I very heavily wanted a deck that would have a very high graveyard strategy, synergy strategy. And I thought Reanimator, because it's something we can work with a budget that's rather strong. And there's going to be a few other cards that kind of play with the graveyard a little bit so that we can take advantage of it. This is all also with the fact that Francisco will grow pretty quickly. If we can go, on our first turn, Francisco's out, attack with 1 creature, next turn 2 creatures, and hopefully from that point 3 creatures, we're gonna have a Francisco that goes into a 1/2, a 3/4, a 6, a 7, and then hopefully growing more and more. But even then, attacking with a 6/7 commander is pretty good. So my question was, who do I pair Francisco with? Now, there's a lot of options, mainly red or blue commanders. There is a red and blue commander partner, but is outside of kind of the means of this deck and what it wants to do. So I thought it would be a lot cleaner to just partner them with the original Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator. And the thing with Malcolm here is that both of these abilities work really well together, right? They basically do the same thing. Whenever one or more pirates you control deal damage to your opponents, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. So once again, that's a maximum of 3. And both of these kind of add up to our perfect commander setup. One of these is card advantage, and the other one is mana. Now, obviously, the deck is more built around Francisco than Malcolm, so you don't have to cast out Malcolm early, but if you do, you're going to be reaping in treasures as well as card advantage. So I do really like this. I think this also solves a lot of problems that Reanimator decks tend to have, where eventually you might get into a position you just cannot cast these giant cards in your deck, but Malcolm will accelerate you into them and provide you like with a base of treasure tokens on the side that you can just hold on to so that later you can cast these cards or you can have more explosive plays. So I do really like this combination. I will say there's probably something to be said about a red partner instead, but I did really like Malcolm, and I think we're losing a lot by not playing them. I think maybe there is a world where you just build the deck differently, but for now, I think that this is the best bet. So here is the deck we are looking at, and obviously I like it, I built it. Is it perfect? Probably not. According to this, we're about at $82 American probably, and I think that number can be adjusted higher or lower depending on cards, depending on versions. I don't know if it's always necessarily the cheapest one, but as a whole, the deck is at that cost. We can look at the curve, and the curve looks very similar to many Reanimator decks you might be playing with. You can see once we go to 8, all of our 8 mana cards are delve cards, so will rarely be more than, let's say, 3 mana, ideally. At 7 mana, all creatures we'd like to reanimate. At 6 mana, creature we want to reanimate. And at 5 mana, we have 2 creatures we'd like to reanimate, and the rest of reanimation spells and styles. So, with that in mind, we're going to look through the deck a little bit. I don't want to go through, let's see how much through the deck I'm going to go through. We're going to try to look at the main strategy and have some ideas of how to play it, and then wrap it up there. Obviously, we'll not be adding more cards to it because it's already been through that point. So the main thing I wanted when we look at our pirates is I looked at our pirates in blue and black, and I found that there's not a lot of very good pirates after a certain mana cost. And I think that's fine. The main idea here is a lot of our low mana pirates are very evasive. We have a lot of flying pirates. We have an unblockable pirate, and we have some black, just kind of aggressive, greedy freebooter. We don't mind if he dies because we'll get to scry and get a treasure token. Grasping scoundrel, it's fine. We have a bunch of, some of them are what I call these universal automatons, where the only thing we want about them is that they are a pirate at 1 mana. Because the goal is to get a pirate out early so that we can play Francisco on our second turn, immediately start exploring. So some of these are a little better than others, but with the main goal that if possible, I'm going to grab evasion. Then at our second mana, we have much more evasion if possible. Departed Deckhand is just unblockable outside of spirits. Dire Fleetholder, once again, just wants to die. Fleet Captain has menace. Freebooter has flying. That's not a pirate. Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel has flying. Warcat Marauder has flying, etc., etc. So our first bunch in 1 and 2 mana are almost mostly evasive for the same kind of thing. Now, granted, we're going to be generally playing Francisco on turn 2, so a lot of these aren't as important to come out early. But after which, if we're dropping our 2 mana drops, they're all going to be evasive with the same idea that we want to be building towards Francisco's Explore ability. And at 3 mana, these are competing with Malcolm, but we've got a bunch of kind of more in-between cards. Corsair Captain is really interesting as it is a bit of a Kindred buff and gives us a treasure token. We're not going that much into Kindred, to be honest, but we do like the ability to kind of still get some attacks in, and we do have some aggressive finishing cards, so it doesn't hurt to have an ability like this. But otherwise, a lot of our abilities at 3 mana are much more themed to kind of maybe have some pirates to them, but work with the deck generally. For example, Doom Necromancer is just a Reanimator creature and not a pirate. Forerunner of the Coalition can tutor our other pirates, so we can ensure to kind of grab them. Especially, this is a good combination that if you put it on top of your deck and then use Francisco to explore and mill it, it's a very easy way to get Dire Fleet Ravager, who's a very powerful pirate, into our graveyard to be reanimated. Let's see. Ruin Raider is a fantastic pirate that I've played in more competitive and stronger decks where it just basically gives you a Dark Confidant trigger as long as you attacked, which is really, really good. We've got a few high mana cards, but I think it's still worth the risk. Fleet Negotiator, another pirate with flying with an upside. And then into 4 mana, we've just got, I think, our last few pirates at Hostage Taker, Amphin Mutineer, which will turn exile creatures into salamanders, which is cute, with an encore ability from the graveyard. Ramirez de Petro Pillager, which is a very, very funny card that once again kind of works with our themes here. Not only does when he comes into play, we get 2 treasure tokens, but then as just like our other commander's ability, per opponent we hit, we will steal the top card of their deck and we can cast it, but we need to use treasure to cast it if it's not in our colors. All right, and that's generally, I will get back to the Ravager, but that's a different thing. That's generally our pirate collection. So that was the first part of the deck. I built this collection of pirates. You have to remember, a lot of them, the whole point is that we want to use them to trigger our commanders. The goal is to be milling 3 cards at least off the top of our decks, our deck, and generating 3 treasure each turn, digging further and further, ideally to find the cards to reanimate. So let's skip to that. What do we want to reanimate, or what do we want in our graveyard? Before we pass the 4 mana mark, I'd like to bring up Wonder. Wonder is a card that's going to give all of our creatures flying. There's a bit of a flying sub-theme here I'll get to, but at the moment, it's just a really powerful card that we're just happy to get into the graveyard as fast as possible. But going into our reanimation targets, Dire Fleet Ravager is our last pirate in the deck and is a very, very strong one. Once he ETBs, each player loses a third of their life rounded up. Now, I really like this because not only are we naturally kind of an aggressive deck, that's a lot of damage that can be done through against all of our opponents. In addition, the way I like a card like this with an ETB is to constantly trigger it over and over again. So reanimation is a really great way to do this. Dire Fleet Ravager has Menace and Death Touch, therefore attacks really, really well into a group of enemies. And then when he dies, you're really, really happy to just reanimate them again and take another third off. Now, if I remember correctly, the best way to do it is to reanimate before you attack. Yeah, because that's how math works. But in certain situations, you might do it the other way, letting Dire Fleet Ravager die in combat. This card used to be a little more expensive, but I think with the reprint has dropped in value, making it a really easy pickup for a budget deck like this. Our next card, which is unfortunately one of our, if I remember correctly, oh no, that's not too much. All right, maybe the copy I saw was a little more expensive, but Sir Conrad the Grim, which is always a really nice black aristocrat style, mill style finisher, where the main idea is whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, i.e. per explorer, he's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent. That's going to add up really, really quickly. Also, as we know, this also triggers when a creature leaves your graveyard, and with reanimation, that's an extra point of damage here and there, which is cute, but not really much. The other reason I really like it in this deck is that each player mills a card is a mana sink, and this deck is kind of missing a mana sink, so having something like this that we can just pour mana into to get ahead and do extra damage here and there is very, very powerful. So Sir Conrad is a very nice inclusion here. Now we're getting to our bigger ones. Here's a 6 mana reanimation target, and that's Necropolis Regent. I think for a while this card was printed into so many commander decks, and its value is incredibly low because of it. But I do think this is the kind of card that people underestimate, including me. Basically what it does is it makes that every time one of our creatures deals combat damage, they will then basically double in power and the equivalent in toughness by +1/+1 counters, right? And though this is, it doesn't trigger until combat, it does trigger on combat and not like the next turn. And so once you get that attack in, you will grow your board by a very large amount. And once it comes back, you've got a 6/5 flyer who can attack as well, and a bunch of pirates, hopefully with flying or any other evasion, who are themselves very, very large now. So I do like Necropolis Regent. I think it's a great card to reanimate at any point at low, It doesn't lock down games. This isn't like Elish Norn or anything, but still very, very strong to kind of swing the game in your favor in an aggressive direction. Then we've got two other more card advantage style reanimation targets. One of them is Lord of Change. Lord of Change says, did I miss one? I did miss one, sorry. Let's do them anyways. Okay, so Lord of Change, I really, really do like. It's a card that's always been kind of interesting to me, but I haven't found the deck to put it in, and I think this is exactly the kind of deck with this kind of budget, where you just reanimate them to immediately get a 6/6 flyer that has ward 3 and draw 3 cards. I'm pretty happy with that exchange. There's a lot of, you'll see these cards that get like incremental advantage, one of the other draw card especially, but Lord of Change immediately gets you 3 cards. I really like that kind of interaction, and then your opponents just have to deal with it, and I do like that. You don't really see cards like, it's funny that a card like this hasn't been printed before in the same kind of, like, obviously with Ward they probably wouldn't have done that in the past, but just an ETB to draw a nice amount of cards. Like, it's not Muldrifter, and I think if you really wanted to, you could play Muldrifter as well, but I like this a lot more. It's a good body, Ward 3 is really relevant, and immediately draw cards. And then when it dies, you just reanimate it again for another 3 cards. So I do like that. The other one is going back to what I said, the flying sub-theme. And there's going to be at least one more card, I think, that has this kind of theme to it. And the idea is that a large amount of our pirates have flying. Not all of them, but enough, including both of our commanders. So I wanted Wind Reader Sphinx as one of our options to reanimate, because once again, this is an attack trigger, so we can reanimate this in main phase 1, and go to attacks and immediately hopefully draw 3, 4, 5 cards. And this will work kind of opposite to our demon over here of Lord of Change, in the sense that Wind Reader Sphinx, yeah, may not draw 3 cards every time, or may just draw 3 cards at attack, but if we go through a turn cycle and the Sphinx is still there, well, then you get an additional bunch of cards that you're going to draw. I think this is very, very strong. The body of a 3/7 flyer is really good, especially defensively when you have to get through that turn cycle. I think this is fantastic. And this is the kind of thing I try to think of Reanimate, especially in budget. We don't want to sit here and just imagine like all of the game-ending cards, and especially in Kindred decks, like this is a pirate deck, we should be thinking outside of just the creature type, of what kind of themes these creatures work well together in. And here it's flying, so I want to take advantage of that. Then this is not a reanimation creature, but it's just worth noting that Gorex is really, really good as a delve creature to basically exile a lot of your lower mana pirates that will go into the graveyard that you don't want to reanimate. Just exile all of them for Gorex, drop Gorex, and then every attack, and when he dies, you're going to get one of those back, which is going to add up pretty quickly. And a 4/4 Death Touch is not a bad thing either. So I do like Gorex for sure. But I did miss one, and this is my favorite, and this is Dusk Mangler. And I think this is a card that is criminally underplayed in Commander right now. The comparison to this card is something like our Archon. What is our Black Archon's name? I've reanimated it so many times that I can't even remember. Because I noticed Bolas is Archon, but that's not what it's called. Archon of Cruelty. So Archon of Cruelty has this really big swing effect. That's why it sees play in like Modern and other formats as a really strong kind of gain a bunch of stuff and your opponents lose the equivalent. But the thing is, this is one opponent. It's also kind of an expensive card. So in comparison to that, I really, really like Dusk Mangler. It's 1 less mana, and the way it works is you have to pay one of these additional costs. Not all of them, just one of them. And then on ETB, see, this is on cast, on ETB, each opponent sacrifices a creature, discards a card, and loses 4 life. That's a lot multiplied by 3 with 3 opponents. And the fact that the downside is only on cast makes this so good to reanimate. If we had some Blink, which we could put in the deck, it gets even better. But personally, I'm really happy just reanimating this creature, you know, getting a ton of card advantage with the discards and the sacrifices, dealing enough damage, and then just attacking with it when your opponents have the knowledge that if it dies, you can reanimate it again. So this is a card I really, really like in Commander, especially mid to low power Commander. I think it's really underrated in Reanimator strategies. And I think if you're watching this video, I would give it a swing because it's very, very strong. So what about the rest of our deck? Well, the rest of our deck is pretty cleanly filled with what I would say is generic support spells for the archetype. So I'll go really quickly. Our artifacts are mostly mana artifacts with Lightning Greaves. Our only enchantment is Reconnaissance Mission, which is a card I do like in a go wide strategy such as this with all our little pirates to draw us cards. And if you're behind or it's not the right time, you can cycle this card away. I'm a big fan of that. But looking at our sorceries, we've got removal generally, and then we have our reanimation. We've got persist, buried alive. Victimize is really good here, honestly. I don't usually love Victimize because I feel like it's very swingy, but in a deck like this, I really like it because there's going to be situations where you're going to be able to sacrifice a pirate and get one of your reanimation targets, but also another pirate, and I think that'll be worth it most of the time. Dread Return, which also is really, really strong here because you can flash it back by sacrificing creatures, which you have access to a lot of small creatures to trade them for your big creatures, right? Incarnation Technique, which is a card I really, really like that allows you and an opponent, it allows you to reanimate after milling, and then an opponent and you do it again. So you cast it first, they cast it second, you cast it third, putting you ahead with 2 cards, and you pick the deck that has the least amount of big reanimation targets, and you can get really far ahead there. Living Death is your board clear. It's a very good board clear. It flips your graveyard and the board, and you really have the means to take advantage of this. But I will also suggest this is also an anti-board clear card. Right? There's going to be situations you use this as a board clear, and there's going to be situations where the board has been cleared and you cast this to get your board back plus all your reanimation targets. I think this card is really, really slept on. I think we talk about one-sided or uneven board clears a lot, and Living Death is very much so one of those. You can take advantage of it and get really far in the game really easily, and you can even like trade a subpar board for a much stronger one with this, while, you know, making all of your opponents their battlefields much worse. So I really, really like this card. I find it to be very, very strong, and I heavily recommend playing it. Writ of Return is something that's interesting to me. It is a reanimation spell that has Cypher, and I think if I'd ever wanted in a deck, it would be in this one. I think it bears some testing. I hope it performs well. Because I think it's going to be very, very strong, but it's close. 5 mana is a lot for a reanimation, but the fact that you could get 2 in 1 turn, casting this on main, ciphering this onto a flying pirate, attacking again, dealing damage, and then getting another creature out is really, really nice. So I think it is very, very strong. And then Treasure Cruise. I wanted to point out Winged Words is our second Flying Matters card, which becomes 1 and a blue, draw 2 cards. I think I could have gotten, now that I think of it, there's that blue mat Chart a Course could belong in here as well, but at this point I'm leaving the deck as it is, and then, you know, anyone can change things as they see fit, but Winged Words feels particularly strong here because of our number of flyers that we have access to. And at worst, it is just divination, and I think that's very, very good. Looking through our instance, we've got some cards that put cards in our graveyard. We have Counterspell, we have Counterspells and Removal. Forbidden Alchemy is a card that you can cast from your graveyard, which is really, really nice. Frantic Search is a fun card to fix your hand and also untap your mana. Sauron's Ransom and Fact or Fiction are 2 cards that I really, really like because they are just very powerful at kind of setting up some political turns or some turns that are just kind of, you can't lose, especially Fact or Fiction. Sauron's Ransom is a bit harder, but it really helps you to get the cards you want in your hand and your reanimation targets into the graveyard. Both of these are very, very good at that. Lethal Scheme just got reprinted. I think this is a card I need to pick up for my cube as well, but I think it's a very, very good card. Not just is this convoke destroy target creature at instant speed, it also connives every single one of the creatures that tap for this. This is a fantastic card. Like, I really, really recommend it. If you can get it for 50 cents, if you're playing in black with a bunch of creatures, you will like this card. So I do very much so recommend it. Then finally, Dig Through Time to round it out as our last delve card. We have 36 lands. A lot of them come in tapped. That's just the nature at this budget. I'm pretty sure there is room in this budget to do things like the blue-black fast land. I can't remember what it's called, but and a few other lands that like such as the Transform land and a few others that you could probably get away with to keep a lot of untapped lands in. But I wanted to keep a nice little buffer at $82. So I kept this place just generic of the cheapest ones you can get, and we were running like 19 basics, which is a bit much, but not the worst. And that's the deck. I really, really like it, so much so that I think I've ordered most of it myself so I can play with it as well. I think it's really, really fun. It is definitely at a lower power level, but that can be changed really easily depending on what your playgroup is. Inserting things like Rhystic Study, more card draw like Necropotence, or even Phyrexian Arena could make a big difference. But I will say that the core idea of the deck is really strong. The Reanimator as well can be buffed if you want to put it in Tomb, Reanimate, those kind of like key cards. You can put more legendary cards. I try to play non-legendary for Persist, which is one of the best reanimation spells in low budget, so that you can play things like not Grizzlebrand because they're banned, but Villas, any of our Praetors in our colors, which are both all really good. So there are a few more options that you can go into depending on your budget. Of course, the Praetors themselves are pretty high on budget as well. But yeah, that's the deck. I hope you liked it. Thank you so much, Red Star, for giving me the opportunity to build this deck. I hope you like it. I think it's very, very good. And yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And like I said, I got it myself, so I hope to play it soon because I think it's really, really cool. And I hope to see maybe if other people want to see their own decks built, I'd love to see what you want. But if not, we'll be back to deck assisting soon. All right. Good luck, everybody, with your deck building.